Wonge varini kinyokin kikusiake maninki.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of AI Transformation Playbook, the podcast where we move beyond AI headlines to explore what it really takes to lead organizations through AI transformation. I am Eric Bannavti Swizeka. Every week, we speak with executive innovators, researchers, and transformation leaders who are helping organizations adopt AI responsibly while strengthening leadership, governance, and human judgment. Today's conversation is one I think every executive needs to hear. When ChatGPT first appeared, most people had one or two reactions. Some believe it will change the world overnight. Others dismissed it as another technological fad. Today's guest actually started in the second group. He thought ChatGPT looked like a joke, but instead of dismissing it, he decided to test his own assumptions. He challenged him to write 100 articles using AI. That experiment became more than 200 published articles and eventually evolved into an entirely new way of thinking about leadership in the AI era. He argues something I found incredibly powerful. AI isn't simply an efficiency tool. It is a thinking tool. And perhaps more importantly, if we aren't careful, it also changes the way we think. So joining us today is Philip, top author of Craft Thinking, a playbook for clear thinking and better decisions with AI. Philip, welcome to AI Transformational Playbook.
Eric, I appreciate that lead in. It was fantastic, and I'm happy to be here and share my journey of what I thought was a joke, and now it's what I live for to make the future better.
Let's begin at the beginning, Philip. You openly admit that when ChatGPT first appeared, you weren't impressed. Tell us that story. What made you skeptical? What changed your mind?
So let's first say my first experience with AI was the traditional machine learning AI back in 2008. And I have some patents and peer publications. And just for your audience, so they know what that is, every time we use the shopping companies and you put something in your shopping cart, it says, you bought this, you might like that. That's the traditional AI that's just predicting what you might do. That was traditional. So when generative AI came out and they said, oh, we've got it. And I'm talking when they had that first little user interface, not the programming one, but they had the little chat bot, and you could type something in and get an answer. And it was very cute. You could ask it to write a poem, or you could ask it to tell you something like if you were a 3-year-old or a 6-year-old, to translate from English to Spanish to Tagalog. But it hallucinated. And I thought, I can't use that for work. I can't trust it. There's no way. Absolutely terrible. And then millions of downloads later, I said, oh, something's different. Something's captured the imagination of people. That's when I said, hey, I need to challenge myself. It says it's really good for writing. It's really helpful for that. And I says, it can't do as good as me at writing. It's not very good. I personally challenge myself to write 2 articles every week for 50 weeks, 100 articles. You have to understand, this was a big challenge for me because you remember school and they teach you how to write. You write a topic sentence, you create an outline, and then you have to put everything in your order. Well, my brain runs really fast and I get terrible. I'm a terrible typer. So I thought, this isn't going to work. And it did. And we can dig into that. And as you said, 200 and something articles later, I'm now on stage talking about AI, talking about governance, leadership, and other things. So it's been a fantastic journey.
Awesome. Most people either become believers or critics. You became a researcher. That is, you went beyond that. Why write 100 articles? Why not simply experiment for, let's say, a few weeks and move on to something else? Was there a moment where one interaction where you realized this isn't just another software tool?
Yes, great question. And yes, I don't know that there was a specific moment, but I will say when I was going and researching and trying to understand why it was so important, people were talking on YouTube of how they could write Twitter posts, or I should say X posts and Instagram posts. And that seemed nice, but I was pushing the envelope and asking what it could do, listening to the conversation. And I realized that I was using it differently. And in writing, I was using it differently. I was literally talking to the computer and then having it create that outline that I would write against. And then I would write one paragraph and I would say, be an editor, tell me why this is terrible, tell me why this is good, help me learn how to be a better writer. That's when it suddenly realized it changed. So that was the first sort of transformation. The second was I published to Substack, and it was a way to test my ideas, right? Oftentimes we push our ideas out there, nobody listens, we're just talking in the wind. And then I realized that no, it's different. And as the Substack got better, you'll like this. A couple of millennials had read my idea about using it to help you think. And that's when I'd come up with the craft. And the millennials said, that's simple. That's easy. You should write it as a book. And that's how the book got created. So
that's interesting. And talking about the book, one sentence from your work really stood out to me. You say AI is not just an efficiency tool, but a thinking tool. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, you pull up any newspaper article, everybody's worried about the company that installs AI for customer service, and they reduce the workforce by a tremendous amount. Every tool we have ever used, whether it was the steam engine to make things faster, railroads and machines, or electricity to turn the lights on so we could work longer, we could run machines faster, and then even the internet, so we could communicate and do YouTube. We could do Zoom calls like we're doing now, and Google Meet calls across half the world. Those are all efficiency things, right? I don't have to hop on an airplane. So we've been trained to think of these tools as efficiency. And for me, as I was starting to write, I'm realizing, no, I'm challenging my own thinking, and it's the way I ask it, it's pushing back. So I started with simple things. I wrote this: tell me where I have unsupported facts. Tell me where a marketing person won't understand.
Oh, absolutely.
So I suddenly realized, man, it was changing the way I do things. And I'm saying it's augmenting my thinking. I'm a thinker, I'm a synthesist. But I was using the tool differently, and that's why the craft came out. It's a thinking tool, and we don't understand that it's changing things so dramatically.
Thank you for that clarification. So what do you think? Most executives still see AI as automation, productivity, cost savings. You are arguing something much deeper. What does AI actually influence thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. And most of us are still thinking about it as a tool, and we're going to use it like a tool. We've been trained for the last 100 years that a new technology comes out, it's a tool. That's all it does. So I don't blame anybody for that. But it is a deeper tool, because when you suddenly start using it and asking, let's say you're preparing to create a business plan and you use AI to help you write a better business plan, it's changing the way you think. You're doing it quicker, faster, but it's also suggesting places that could be wrong, right? Or you need to write a memo to the company or discuss a new marketplace or competitive analysis. All of those things, it can challenge the way you approach that, because you no longer have to worry about learning. It's easier. The harder part is thinking about what you just learned to figure out what your company really wants to do, what your intentions are.
So it means AI, can it actually improve thinking, or does it simply make average thinkers think fast?
So it is a skill. So you've nailed it. So if you're the guy that always looks for the easy button, you go to Google and you do a search and you click on the first thing and that's the easy button all the time, then that's not a leader. If you search and you question the answers and you ask that's a leader.
Absolutely.
Right?
I love that. Yeah.
So if you're naturally that inquisitive and questioning, the tool can augment your leadership and augment your inquisitiveness and augment your intentionality. But if you're lazy, forget it. You're just going to be lazier.
Yeah, absolutely. So you also said it can surface blind spots, challenge assumptions, and expand reasoning. Can you give us a real world example of that?
Yes. So I'm going to go back to even some things I was doing today. So today I was preparing to put together a presentation, and I talked about what I wanted to cover in the presentation, and I was talking about how to make decisions and how to use it to make decisions. And then what I did was, here's the audience, help me play the skeptic. Imagine you're the skeptic. How will a skeptic really just tear this presentation apart? And it did that really well. In fact, I have a blind spot. I forgot to explain something that I know all the time. Mm-hmm. And they, picked up actually on the efficiency tool, right? They'd say, well, it's just efficiency. All the news is efficiency. Where's the evidence that it's thinking, right? So that's a prime example where you can use it that way.
Thank you very much for that clarity. So going back to the hallucination we mentioned earlier on, the hallucination that nobody talks about. So one of the possible titles for today's episode, AI isn't the only thing hallucinating. Your thinking might too. So tell us what you mean by that.
So there's a lot of things to unpack there. First off, a lot of people, we have to remember the AI systems are built because they hoovered up or vacuumed up all the data and then built these models. And we know that these models are biased. If I vacuum up all the data from Europe, I'm going to have a very Europe-centric view. If I vacuum up all the data from China, I'm going to have a very China-centric view. So they're inherently biased. I don't know about you, but every human I've ever met has some level of bias, right? Because it's what they know. If I grew up in Europe, I know the culture of Europe, and I'm going to eat food with my knife and fork. But if I come to America, I'm going to use my fork and use it as a knife, and that's a bias. It's a simple bias. It doesn't mean anything. But there's so many others that have torn nations apart. So we have to be very aware that we are biased by nature. When we are, as leaders, we're always self-improving and striving to be better and reach out to that diversity and engagement and looking across the globe to find other ways of doing business. Otherwise, you're stuck to doing business in your own country.
Definitely. And bias leads to stigma. So those are things we need to be aware and watch out for. So where do you think leaders fool themselves most with AI?
They fool themselves the most by using what I call the wisdom of the crowds. So if everybody, and right now the internet is fantastic at amplifying social media. So if I have an influencer and they're selling, AI is taking jobs, that's what people hear, right? And they don't consider the alternative. So leaders oftentimes judge by being what the popular opinion is or what's safe. And right now, everybody's so scared of it. And I don't say rush or run, but what I do tell them is you want to lean into that graciously and go slow. We can talk about that a little bit more. But the main thing is it's too easy. I'll give you one example of a mindset. Have you ever been to a building or a concert or a meeting and the meeting's over and everybody's leaving and they go to the door that's obvious? It's marked. It's the door at the front or the back and everybody goes there and everybody follows everybody. Yeah. Well, if you're the leader that stops looks around, you might realize, oh, there's a second door. Let's go use the second door. And the leader actually goes to the second door and says, hey guys, there's a second door, right? The selfish leader, the person that's selfish, goes to the second door and just leaves, right?
That's a very critical example. So I guess, do you think AI exposes bad thinking or it amplifies?
It absolutely, it does both. It will, this is where leaders have to understand that it is a tool and it is a thinking tool and it amplifies. So if we're out for good, it's going to amplify good. If we're out to hurt somebody, it'll amplify that. And that's what we need to guard against. And that's, as leaders, that's the part that I think we need to understand, that AI is an amplifier. And so as you develop better capabilities of leadership, governance, and model behavior, you can amplify that with AI. And that's fantastic.
Then talking about someone who already has poor decision-making habits, what happens when they suddenly gain access to incredible, capable AI?
Yeah, well, that's where, as an individual, that's the wisdom of the crowds actually has to push back against it. It's what we're doing now as a globe. We're pushing back around certain things. We're still trying to figure out what's right, what's wrong. But I'm a firm believer that having more conversations prevents that bad actors. I don't see a future that's all black and dark and robots killing things. I don't see that. I think we'll figure it out before that. People are pretty darn smart, right?
We always figure things out.
Let me pose this for your audience. If you stop and think about it, as dark as the news is around the different wars and the different situations, what we have produced with AI is the pinnacle of cooperation across multiple countries. We could not have what we're producing if you didn't have people in Taiwan with the factories, if you didn't have designers in America, if you didn't have the machinery from the Netherlands and such, and you didn't have countless people across Asia and Europe. It's a huge cooperation to make that happen. In South America and Africa, that doing different things.
Wonge varini kinyokin kikusiake maninki Gloria